Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Copilot Compass, where each week we take a deep dive into Microsoft 365 Copilot. As always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my esteemed colleague, fellow Copilot enthusiast, and our resident smart guy, Logan.
Thanks, Grant. Happy to be here.
And Logan, why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what they can expect from this week's episode?
Yeah. So as always, we're going to get started with our question of the week, and then we'll get to our topic, which is all about Copilot Studio. So we're going to take a lot deeper dive than we did last time. Go over some of the more complex functions that you can do. Yeah, I'm excited. It should be a fun topic. And make sure you stay tuned to the end for a sneak preview of what we have next. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for our question of the week. We got an audience one that's kind of, I don't want to say it's funny. It's half funny and half, can be scary for folks. So little cliffhanger for all of us here, but let's dive into the question of the week.
Let's do it. Okay, so it's time for our question of the week. And remember, you can submit your own with a comment on this video or emailing the email address in the description. So this week, our question is Copilot coming for my job?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a funny one. And I think, we have to put ourselves in a user's perspective, the end user here, somebody that's working in accounts receivable or, has like a data entry type of job. I don't know, how many of those exist anymore, but it's a common thing to wonder, you start to think of, okay, well, this makes, so much of my day more efficient, or now I don't have to do some of these tasks. And so that, it is the natural next question is, there downsizing here? And the answer is, we're not seeing that yet, at least. Most, shouldn't say most, but like pretty much all organizations, like what people aren't doing is using AI to replace the need for humans. What it's doing instead is it's giving those humans opportunities to contribute to new, high business impact activities, or contribute in new ways, do some additional trainings, learn new skills. It's not like they're saying, okay, this 12-person team, now we can do it with only 10. What they're doing instead is they're finding new opportunities for them to support the growth of the business and bring, more value. So I think, I don't have a crystal ball here to predict, long-term future, but like as of now, what we're seeing in the market is that companies are not bringing in AI to replace people, but instead to enhance the way that people work. So, again, I understand where people come from, and I do think that, it can be a bit scary at times, but, I would encourage people to take a deep breath and recognize that that's just not the reality of what we're seeing and what companies are planning for. And I think, one important point on that is it's important for leaders in businesses to make the messaging clear. I think companies are doing a pretty good job. People are getting better and better about providing adequate training and adoption support with things like Copilot, like the user interfaces of generic AI. But you have to make sure you're clear on the vision for it, especially if you are one of those organizations that recognizes, hey, my individual contributors have new ways that they can contribute to the organization. Make that message clear so that people don't, make their own inferences. But yeah, I don't know. Interesting topic. It's something that we do talk a lot about. It's a question I'll get asked all the time at like networking events or, following up on presentations I might give. But yeah, I don't know. Passionate topic for me. Logan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Copilot and Gen AI is here to help people, right? So,
Yeah.
but in that same vein, right, like Copilot's not coming for your job, but maybe somebody who is ready to adopt change and new AI, they might be coming for your job, right? Like it's
Yeah.
all about being able to start using these tools. It's just another tool that you got to use. So, I think, yeah, like you were saying earlier, it's all about helping you do the best that you can at your own job. But yeah, it's going to be increasingly more important that you are able to be able to use the tools readily available to you. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I would encourage, people that are still fearful of that. Maybe the messaging hasn't been clear from your leadership as to how this fits into your organizational goals. I still really encourage you to, dive in head first into this wave of generative AI, because, it is going to create new opportunities for people, but those opportunities are only going to come from those that, that do adapt. So,
yeah,
give it a try. Don't be fearful. But
yeah.
all right. Anyways, fun question this week. Ready to get into our topic of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So our topic of the week is we're going to revisit Copilot Studio and do, I'd say maybe a little bit deeper of a dive. This is still, very much targeted at end users, non-technical folks. I mean, it's simple enough that even I can understand it. So, nothing crazy complicated, but I would say, relative to other topics that we cover, maybe a little bit technically deep. So Logan's going to have two demos for us this week. So the first one is he's going to go through topics. And this is, basically how you can coach an agent or guide an agent to, when a certain topic is brought up or part of the conversation, how the agent then flows the conversation from there based on that input from the user. So that's going to be our first crow's nest demo. Our second crow's nest demo is going to be on actions. And this is the ways that Copilot can interact with, data or other knowledge bases and setting up those special connectors. So, with that, I think, there's a couple of demos and let's just go ahead and dive right into those. What do you say?
Cool. Yeah, no, it's a good start. Okay, so let's start discussing topics in Copilot Studio. So I have our standard Copilot Studio open up here, and we're just going to go ahead and click New Agent. And so for the purposes of this demo, our agent itself doesn't really matter. So we're just going to do a IT chatbot, but we're going to do it kind of quickly. So you are an IT chatbot. And it gives us some descriptions automatically, and we'll just confirm that because that looks good for now. Okay, and we can just skip to configure here. We don't need to do all this. So as we showed you in the previous Copilot Studio example, so we can fill in all of our different descriptions, our instructions for how we want the chatbot to behave, some starter prompts, and then adding a knowledge base. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we don't really need any of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Create up here.
I'm just going to point out that you picked a boring name for your IT chatbot.
I sure did. Yeah, it could have been a little bit more fun. Maybe we can change that later on. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Okay. So yeah, we're going to discuss topics today. So topics are basically how you want the chatbot to respond when somebody brings up a certain type of topic. So we have these default ones that just come preset up. So we have our goodbye, our greeting. So we can just jump into our greeting here and take a look at what we have. And so we can see the triggers. So whenever anybody says good morning, good afternoon, hello, hey, it's going to trigger this message here. And how can I help you today? So if I wanted to change this up, I could say, how can I help you with your tech problems? Something like that.
I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer, but like with these phrases that are, it's capturing as a hello, will it what if somebody's asks the question in Spanish? Does it translate that, or do you know how that works?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how that works. Oh, I would imagine it's able to, but I don't know for sure.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But let's see. Or should we just test it out? Should I just say hola? Let's see.
Oh yeah. Bien. Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, it works. So it translated it. Cool. All right.
There you go.
Well, we learned something new today. How about that?
Right? Exactly. Cool. Yeah. So you had these basic ones, right? They're not all too interesting, and not going to be all that unique or unique, to one that actually serves a purpose, right? So let's do that. So let's create a new topic up here. And we're just going to create a description with Copilot. This makes it really easy. You can just kind of type what you want. So let's create a topic, a scenario when the user needs help updating their PC. So let's just name this topic PC update help. And um, let's say when the user needs help updating their PC, they will prompt will stop. Okay. And we can just create our topic here. Cool. So Copilot automatically grabbed a bunch of phrases. So any of these things that it says, it's automatically going to trigger this topic event, right? And so now whenever I say, how can I update my PC assistance, basically any of these words in any, order that kind of makes sense, it's going to prompt this message here. How can I assist you with updating your PC? So that's kind of helpful, but not entirely, let's see what else we can do here. So we can go in here and we could add a basic card. So now whenever somebody asks about updating your PC, we can have a lot more information here. So we can say, update, PC update info. You can say, follow this URL to update your PC. We can add a picture of a computer here. Let's just open these. And then we'll just say, go to, whatever link, pchelp.com. And this could be like a SharePoint link. It could be a web link, whatever you want. But just for the purpose of the demo, we're just going to do this for now. So we can just click save here. Cool. And now let's test it out. So can you help me update my PC?
It's nice that you can just test it right there in the same, window.
Right, exactly. Now it makes it really helpful, and this window is going to become really helpful in the next demo that we're going to do too.
Nice.
So yeah, you can see we have our nice, pretty little card here. So whenever somebody asks about PC help, they can just go to this link. You can see you can put whatever you want in here, and there's tons of different options you can do with these different cards. You could add a video, you can add adaptive cards with a bunch of other functions. Attach files, images, etc. So lots of cool things you can do. Yeah, but so this is a very kind of linear, I need help with my PC updates, and it's just going to bring you to one option. But let's say, maybe there's lots of different options. Maybe there's lots of different, versions of Windows. Typically in an organization, everyone's going to be on the same, version of Windows. But for this example, let's pretend they're not. So let's create a new topic here. And instead of doing create from description with Copilot, we're going to do from blank. And so, for the majority of things, you can really just do it straight from this Copilot description, and at least to give you a starting place. And it's pretty good at figuring out what you need. But if you're trying to do some more complicated things, going from blank can be helpful. So let's try this. So as you can see, it doesn't have anything. There's no trigger phrases. There's no anything. So let's go in here and edit this. And let's add some phrases. So what do we have? Update, PC update, Windows. Oh, this PC update. So that should be enough. Maybe if we have some issues triggering in the future, we can add more phrases, but that should do the trick. So now we have our trigger here, right? So whenever it hears these phrases, it's going to trigger this event. But what do we actually want to happen when this is triggered? Let's say we want to ask a question. And that question is, what version of Windows are you running? Because depending on what version of Windows you're running, we're going to give you different advice down the line of this conversation here. So we can identify, we could give them multiple choice options where we could say,
Interesting.
Windows 7, 8, 10, 11, whatever. Or we could just do, uh, so we have all sorts of different options. Obviously, some of these aren't really necessarily applicable here. But let's just do a number. And so that number is going to be saved into this variable, and we're going to be able to reference that variable later on down this chain. So once we get this trigger, the chatbot's going to ask us this question: what version of what version of Windows are you running? And then we're going to know what version of Windows we're running. So from there, let's say I have some conditions. So for the first condition, if the variable is equal to 8, then we'll send a message.
Can the message be, what the heck are you still doing on Windows 8?
Yeah, let's do it. What are you still doing on Windows 8? Perfect.
We call it sarcastic bot.
Right, exactly. So let's add another condition here. So if our variable that we've saved, and obviously if you're doing a lot of these, you want to don't just leave it as var1 because that's going to get very confusing very quickly. But since we're just doing one, it should be fine. If we're doing Windows 10, we can say we can add another node, and we'll send a message saying just follow these instructions here, right? And it can be anything, obviously, but it could be a link, it could be just instructions in text, but we'll just say follow these Windows 10 instructions. And we'll do one more for Windows 11. So add a condition, put our variable, and send a message. Follow directions for Windows 11. And as you can see in here, we have is equal to, but we have a lot of other options, right? So maybe the Windows 10 and since Windows 10 and 11 are fairly similar, maybe the response you want is the same. So we can just say, greater than 10, for example. And then we can do, is blank. We can have conditions if it's like a completely different number that we don't reference. But this is a good place for now. So let's just save this and test it out here. Why is this showing their phrases? Oh, I think this didn't save. Update.
I think didn't you override the PC help update help, or is this still says tech support assistant 1, right?
Yeah. This shared on records and 10. Okay, let's just try this out here. I need help updating my PC. Oh, it's because I still have the other one. Hold up 1 second here. And of course, I did the same thing. Let's delete one.
Seriously,
This is the older one. Okay. Why is this not working? Doesn't seem to be triggering here.
yeah, it's giving you like basic advice. It looks like.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I made a silly mistake. I tried to add them all in one, and then I didn't press the plus here. So let's say update and then add. and now it's added here. So
See, you just made that mistake to make sure I was paying attention.
exactly, right? Exactly. Good job. So now we can see here under phrases, we have some of the phrases. So let's try that again. Let's save. You know what? Let's also add one more here just to make sure. How to. Okay. And so whenever you're working over here, I always refresh this chat. I'm not entirely sure if it makes a difference, but I think it does. So it's probably just a good idea. So how do I update my PC? There we go. So now, and you can kind of, I don't know if you saw that, but this kind of lit up over here.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. And so, when these things get really complicated, obviously that's super helpful. You can kind of follow along. So let's say Windows 8. And there you go. Well, you even got my typo in there. So yeah, you can basically see this is how you like logically structure a conversation, and giving different pieces of information when the user types in different stuff. So yeah, this is basically the overview topics. One last thing we can take a look at real quick. Let's just go back to topics here. And so I know I said that creating a description with Copilot doesn't always work for the more complicated things, but sometimes it does. So let's take a look and see what it does when I try to just ask Copilot to basically create what I manually created here. So PC update 2. We'll make sure we have a 2 there. So create a topic that asks what version of Windows the user is running. If they ask about update. So in the past, sometimes this works for creating that kind of like little logic tree, and sometimes not so much. Okay, so here we can see it's basically got it started, right? So
Yep.
it will ask us what version of Windows we're running, and then it will store that variable and actually create a name for the variable, which I did not do, in that string, and then we would just have to go in and add those conditional things afterwards. So it's still a good starting place. It would have saved us one step there, but didn't create the full tree. If I worded that a little bit differently, maybe I would have gotten it to work. But yeah, so it's a good place to start always. But you can also always just start from the manual beginning and kind of work your way out from there. But yeah, so that's our overview about topics.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. This is really neat.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so let's get started with our action section here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new agent again. This time we're going to create a weather bot agent. So you are a weather bot. And similar to the first demo, we don't really need to fill in all this information just for the demonstration purposes. It's going to generate some description for us, which looks good. Weather wizard, there we go, I like that. Yeah. Let's just skip ahead to configure. But yeah, we'll take weather wizard like that. Okay, cool. And we're just going to go ahead and create it. Cool. One thing before we get started to make sure you have on is you want to go into settings here, in generative AI. So a lot of times it'll default to classic, which is a lot more of a kind of the linear approach. But the generative AI has a lot more functionality, and I would pretty much always recommend to have this on. It just kind of makes things a lot easier. So yeah, we're gonna turn that on here. Just go to save. Okay, cool. So let's go back to our agent. And let's add our first action here. So actions are ways that our agent can interact with or get information from other sources. So a few of the basic ones that we have right here are, grabbing Excel sheets or Excel rows, deleting rows, getting worksheets. And then one of the pre-built ones that just comes with Copilot is, the MSN weather, get the forecast for today. So you can add these connections for lots of different softwares, but the weather is just one of the default ones that Copilot provides. So we're just going to do that today. But we are going to discuss the Excel in a little bit here. But let's get started with our weather bot. Cool. So connected to MSN weather. And yeah, we have our name here, get a forecast for today. Description looks good. So we can take a look at our inputs and outputs here. So the inputs, which are going to be coming from the user, which is me, and that's going to be the location of where we want the weather and the units that we want the weather in. And then we can see that we have tons of different outputs, all sorts of stuff, which is pretty cool. But we don't need to look at all that right now. The last thing you'd want to check is the response settings. Make sure that this is checked. Allow the agent to use this action. Do not ask before running this action. Well, we also want to make sure that this is turned on to respond with an AI generated message. I don't really know why this is turned off by default. Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah, make sure you have this on. Otherwise, it will figure out what the weather is, but it won't tell you, which is not too helpful. So let's go ahead and add this action.
And then can you change like the source? Say you don't want to use MSN for whatever reason, use something different.
Yeah, you can. That requires a little bit of like background setup stuff. Right. So it's not like but you absolutely can. Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha.
It's cool. So, and let me just make sure that this is, yeah, okay. Well, just looked a little bit different there, but that's okay. Okay, what is the weather? So let's refresh this guy. What is the weather in LA? Cool. So we got an error, and that's correct because we only provided one of the inputs. We told it Los Angeles, but we didn't say the units. So it's going to automatically prompt us to, ask if we want imperial metric. But that's kind of a hassle, right? You don't want it to ask, what units you want every time you're asking about the weather. So we're going to go in here and edit this.
It's interesting that by default it assumes that it wants you to provide whether you wanted it imperial or metric, but
right. No, exactly. Yeah. It's very specific. If it requires an input, it does require that input. There's no getting around it. So cool. Yeah. Let's look at inputs here. And we have our units here. So dynamically fill with the best option, identifies the user response. Let's just set it as a value. So it's not taken to user response. So it's just always going to be, we live in America. Let's just make it imperial. Cool. And we can save.
I don't know why we don't just all use the metric system, but that's another podcast topic.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's try that again. What is the weather in LA? So this happens quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure why. You basically need to like re-verify some of the connections, especially like the first time you use them. So it's just going to come in here and ask me to connect. And then I just click connect and submit. And then we'll just go back to this page. And then we can just click retry. So it's asking that let's see, do we mess up the units here? Let's see, inputs, set as a value, imperial. Maybe you just didn't refresh. What is he doing? Okay. So it worked that time. I guess I just didn't click refresh. So you can see now it automatically put Imperial in the inputs here, and then location is Los Angeles. Um, cool. So we have our little weather bot here, and we can do lots of cool things. We can add some more of these outputs as always happening. So every time we could also include the moon phase. It just kind of automatically shortens it up to what the bot thinks that we would want. So cool, we have this here. But let's take it a step further. So say that we have, and when we're doing this demonstration, also just think about all the other ways that this type of process could be used. I know that the weather bot might not necessarily be the most like important or thing to the way that you work, but think about how these processes can be implemented in other ways. So now we're going to connect an Excel file here. So I already created this Excel file, and it's going to tell us whether or not we should wear sunscreen or not. So we have a few regions here, LA, New York, Dallas, Seattle, Detroit, and I just filled these out, wear sunscreen or don't wear sunscreen. So how would we get our AI chatbot to reference this information? So we would go to actions and we would create a new action. And so instead of, grabbing the weather here or even just typing get in a row, we're going to do a new action and we're going to create a power automate flow. So I know some of you may have experience with Power Automate, but if not, it's fairly straightforward. It's pretty user friendly. This is kind of like a little bit of an intro, but this should be pretty straightforward. So this is kind of the flow so far. So it's going to be running a flow from Copilot, and it's going to respond to the agent. It's going to feed back that information. But we need our Excel file in here. So let's start with the run and flow from Copilot. So let's add an input. So our input is just going to be test. And that text is just going to be read. And so in between these two pieces, we're going to want to reference our Excel file here. So we're going to click on Excel Online for Business, and we want get a row because we're going to be grabbing a row from this file. So here we just fill in the information of where the file is. So let's find it here. Okay, our sunscreen Excel file here. And then we select the table. There's only one table, so it should just be showing up as table 1 here.
Yep.
Cool. And so for this, it's going to be the input. So we want to reference our region column. So we can see that we have our 2 columns here. We're going to be referencing, we're going to reference the sunscreen column afterwards. And then the key value here. We're not going to type anything in. We're going to click this little lightning bolt, and then we're grabbing the region from this Copilot interaction that we're having in the past. So it knows what the region is from what you type in. So we're going to click region right here. Cool. And this part is all set. So now we just need to look at the respond to the agent. So this is how it's communicating it back to Copilot. So we're going to add the output, which is also just another test. And that's going to be sunscreen. And we were referencing our get a row. So this is back to grabbing that row from Excel. And so we're going to click sunscreen here. And we'll say this is whether the user should wear sunscreen. Cool. So we are good to go here. So let's just save this draft. And publish it. And also let's rename this. sunscreen.
Another relatively boring name there, but we'll live with
Yeah,
it.
I know. I gotta up my game here. Okay, and cool. Now we're published. So now, so Copilot recognized that we're creating a new action, so we can just refresh, and we will be able to find it now. Sometimes it pops up on this main screen. Sometimes you have to search for it. I haven't fully figured out why that is, but let's see. Sunscreen tests, cool.
Okay.
And so this is pretty important. So this is where we want to tell. This is almost kind of like the topic section that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
We have to tell the agent when do we want to trigger this flow. So we want this to happen when, trigger this when the user asks if they should put on sunscreen. And we take a look at the inputs and outputs. We just have our region, and then we have our sunscreen as our output. So let's add the action. Cool. And let's do a refresh, and let's test it out. Should I wear sunscreen in New York today? It doesn't seem to like that. I typed New York like that. Let's try another one. Should I wear sunscreen in Alex today? Okay, cool. So this is that connection thing that we were going through earlier. So maybe that first one just failed because it didn't have the connection set up. So cool. We're just going to connect on my sunscreen test, RBI for our automate flow.
Why doesn't it have that connection like by default?
That's a great question. I don't know. And maybe there's a way to like do it beforehand when you're setting it up, but I've never seen anything. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, if there's any tech savvy folks watching this episode and you know the answer to this question, please do give us a comment or reach out to us, let us know, because now you have tickled my curiosity here.
Definitely. No, it's pretty bizarre that it doesn't happen automatically, but at least it's easy enough and it pops out. You don't have to like hunt for it.
Yeah. It's being easier.
Right. So should I wear sunscreen in Detroit today? I don't know why it's not finding my. Did I spell everything right? Let's try another one. Should I wear sunscreen in um, today? So it says that we're missing the input string, but I'm definitely telling it. Let's just try one more time, and then we'll take a look at something else. So now it's going back to our, so let's just do a little bit of troubleshooting here. Let's see what we have. So these are all typed properly. This is saved. Maybe it doesn't like that the file is open. And then the other thing that we can do here, so their action. So in this last one, it triggered our get a forecast today. Definitely don't want that to happen. So let's go in here and give it a little bit more instruction. Let's say, do not use this source when the user asks if they should wear sunscreen. I cannot spell sunscreen. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's try this one more time. Should I wear sunscreen in Los Angeles? Okay. So that seemed to do the trick. So I think it was getting mixed up because, as we can see, both of these are obviously very weather related. And I think the agent was trying to reference the first one
Yeah.
and kind of getting mixed up. So it's definitely important that you keep things, very clear. And you can just use plain language like I did there, just like, do not do this, right?
Yeah.
So now it's grabbing and I closed the file. I also think closing the file might have helped. I don't know. It might be a little bit weird while the file is just kind of sitting open on my desktop.
Yeah.
But let's just go in and double check that's correct. Correct. Yes, Los Angeles. We want to wear sunscreen today.
Almost always, I'd imagine.
Yes, almost always. Yes. Cool. So it's working now. Awesome. So yeah, you can see sometimes it's a little bit tricky. You gotta do a little bit of low code debugging. But now we have it figured out. And yeah, so this is how you reference Excel files. And so as I'm sure you can imagine, there's tons of use cases for this. If you want to create a chatbot that has, is connected to Excel files with tons and tons of information about whatever it may be, you can do that fairly easily. So yeah, that's how you do it, and that's how you kind of combine it with the another data source. So yeah, that's our overview of topics. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful.
In today's journey of the Copilot Compass, we took another look at Copilot Studio, this time taking a little bit deeper of a dive. We explored actions and topics, and Logan kind of walked us through, how each of those can apply as we're looking to build, agents and things of that nature.
Yeah, hopefully you guys found these examples helpful. I know I had a lot of fun creating these, and yeah, it's just like learning more about Copilot Studio, and it's a really powerful tool that it's kind of limitless with what it can do. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you did, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. And leave us a comment. Remember that we have our Q&A sessions, so leave us a comment with any questions that you have, or email us in the description. And remember that new episodes are released weekly on Tuesdays, and stay tuned for a sneak preview of what we have next.
Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.